Hi, everybody. This is Todd Creager. Today, I am talking to you about how to, as after infidelity has been discovered and we're going through some healing process, how do you manage triggers as a couple? And like I've been doing, I came up with, as I was thinking about my clients, what are the five biggest and most important questions? They are linked, they are connected. What are the five important questions about triggers that I get? And I will answer them one at a time. Question number one that I get: how long will these triggers last? Who usually at last? Usually the person who betrayed will ask that, right? Because they're just wanting the, especially if you've been you've betrayed, you've been caught, you've woke up to, oh my God, I don't want to lose this. I'm working on myself. I'm not doing any of those things. I've closed down any extramarital or outside the committed relationships. I'm really acting with faithfulness. They want to know how long will the triggers typically last. But I have heard, even recently, the betrayed person say, how long will I be like this? When will this go away when I won't feel this way? So they both will ask that question. The answer is, I don't know. I don't know how long triggers will typically last. I do know what will dilute the intensity of those triggers, and we're going to talk about that. And I do know that certain strategies will reduce the not only the intensity, but the frequency of the triggers. But triggers can dilute, but they may last forever. And I don't see that as a problem, which we'll talk about. People make these triggering moments a problem. I'll say this right now. Your mindset's going to shift by the end of this little talk, where triggered moments are opportunities to develop the emotional muscle, as I've talked about before, and deepen your emotional connection. We'll talk more about that. So how long will they last? I've had couples where they just got over it after a certain period of time. It could be months, it could be a couple of years, but they just got over it. You can't expect, depending on how long and how much and what the circumstances were, you can't expect a person who has been betrayed by someone who they really trusted for them to not be triggered within a few months. It's just not going to happen. But it could be years. But how we handle the triggers is more important than how long do they last. Because how you handle the triggers will determine how much triggers will run the show. Question number two: what's the difference between a trigger and regular emotions? And that's the way I'm wording it. People will say, okay, how do I deal with it differently? You probably, the word, my favorite word that I've used, you've heard if you've listened to any of my podcasts of recent time, is attunement, right? We need to have attunement with our partner. It means that we're tuning in. Our partner feels heard, feels like you're trying to get me, you're with me. Your intent is to be with me, not push your agenda, but to be with me. And so that is true for any emotion. But the difference between a trigger and maybe non-triggered emotions is that when we say trigger, it usually means there's been a trauma of sorts. When people like myself, who are trauma clinicians, talk about trigger, we talk about a memories triggered, something that was not just a painful memory, but it was one where it was almost like too much for the person to handle. It was really a very challenging moment, and one's nervous system couldn't just metabolize it and move on. They couldn't process it. So typically, a trigger creates emotions that, and it's coming from an event, maybe the discovery of the infidelity or images or whatever it might be, that caused a lot of distress. Examples of triggers would be how a person goes somewhere, a partner who betrayed goes somewhere in the same vicinity of where they had an affair. It could be time of year. I was just working with a couple where he started this affair in this time of year. So this is the season. I'm not going to say which season because you might be listening now. Or it could be shortly after I recorded or well after. But this was a season that was when it was the same season that he started this whole process. And so she was particularly triggered by the season. And so, sure, there's emotion involved, but it's emotion that's coming from trauma. There were moments where it was a bit much. And so that's why sometimes these trigger moments might not make logical sense to the person who betrayed. It's like, why are you reacting so strongly? It's because it's a trigger. It's not just a logical, rational thing. It's not my football game that I wanted to go watch was rained out. That's disappointing, but it's not traumatic. What we're talking about is when a person is getting triggered because, wow, this was the day that I discovered a year ago what you were doing. That's a major time, usually the year to the day, that a person will be particularly triggered. And we need to be emotionally sensitive to all our partner's emotions, but in particular when there's a trigger of, you know, something to do with the betrayal. Next question. How do I support my partner during triggered moments? Attunement, baby. That's the word. You need to attune. In order to attune, you need to be able to handle whatever emotions come up in you with grace and with maturity, and don't go with it. Stay with your partner. Your partner's getting triggered. It's your partner's turn. If it brings up disappointment, frustration, because you wished it wouldn't be the case, it is the case. You need to accept that is the case. You support your partner. Maybe the first step is to accept A, it happened. B, you did this. C, triggers are inevitable. And it is what it is. And the quicker you accept it, the better able you'll be able to support your partner. And the more you support your partner, the quicker the triggers are going to not take over your relationship, which is actually part of the fifth question. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but they're all connected anyway. So how do I support my partner during triggered moments? A willingness to accept it happened, accept what I did, and accept that triggers are inevitable. And then I'm willing to bear the pain that I might feel when my partner's triggered so that I have the presence to tune in to my triggered partner and be there for my triggered partner and understand and listen and ask for any more information. By the way, I thought of an idea when I was doing this video. I thought one thing that might be helpful is preemptively and proactively to talk with your partner. If you're the betrayed person, say, I know triggers are inevitable. So let's write down, discuss maybe, and write down like potential triggers. Not that you'll catch them all or have them all. That might be not only a loving thing to do, but a very productive and helpful thing to do that you're already on top of it. You're realizing you're expecting it certain time of the year, like I said, or a certain event that you were going to go to, or again, there'll be surprise triggers that you couldn't anticipate. But that would be another way to support your partner to literally bring up what are some potential trigger moments for you so that you know that you can be kind to yourself at those moments. And I know that I need to be kind to you and understanding and sensitive in those moments. You know, that it's just something that I thought of that might be a helpful thing to do. So discussing, bringing it up, and being willing to communicate, look at these moments as opportunities to develop that muscle in you so that you don't just go with your anger or disappointment or shame and you stay with your partner. Fourth question. When should we avoid triggers versus base triggers. Look, if the trigger has already happened, if your partner who was betrayed is already triggered, you've already been triggered. So of course you want to face it. You want to do what I've been saying. You want to tune in. You want to be sensitive. You want to accept that happened so you don't resist it and fight it or fight your partner that they're having an experience. No, you want to attune. So that if it's already happened, that's what you do. What about future triggers? What if you go, we want to go on this trip, but my affair partner was from that country. Just thinking out loud. Just I've never come up with that particular one. Not that you did anything with that person in another country, but they even came from that country. And now the betrayed person is that kind of ruins it for me. I don't really want to go. Again, that's contextual. You got to look at it. How much do you both really want to go? If the betrayed person says, I really want to go, but that person was from that country and it triggers me, then you could go, but you got to be sensitive and tuned in. Or maybe you find an alternative. Maybe you don't have to do that. Maybe you could avoid that trigger. If there's other places you want to visit that both of you, especially the betrayed person, like just as much, do it. Avoid it. You don't have to do that. But if so, again, it's a case by case thing. Is this something that I need to face or can I avoid it? And I think if it's not necessarily that important, then why not avoid it? But what we don't want is for your life to shrink and shrink. And so it's okay, you and all these places are right in our community. So I'm going to just stay in my house. No, can't do that. So you want to be able to face those places and just develop the kind of depth and strength as a couple so that these triggers don't stop you from being at these places. And like in your community, let's say, that might be pretty unavoidable. Okay. Again, the last question, I'm starting to answer it, but how do we prevent triggers from controlling our relationship? It's basically by everything I said, talking about it, expecting certain things, recognizing certain triggers that might happen in the future, other ways that we could have alternatives so that my betrayed partner isn't unnecessarily triggered. Do we have options? But also, and most importantly, the willingness to attune and communicate and stay connected. If you're connecting to your partner that got triggered, that trigger will not control your relationship. I've had countless people that have shared stories. I had most recently a person who did the betraying. His partner got triggered. He could feel his self-anger, his self-condemnation coming up because he was so mad at himself. But he's learned, I got to be kind to me. It doesn't help my partner for me to just beat myself up when my partner's in pain or anytime really. But I need to be kind to myself to stop, be there with her. He was, and it was a big trigger for her. And after not that long a period of time, they were in a much softer place and they went to bed feeling really good about each other and woke up in the morning feeling really good about each other. That trigger did not control their evening, let alone their relationship or the morning after. That's how important it is. Develop the emotional muscle to tune in and to stay connected. So that's what I wanted to say. Those are my 5 questions. And those were the answers. Again, many of them are very connected. But hopefully this is helpful and you use it well. This is Todd Creager, making the world safe for love.